In case you haven't heard about it, there was a civil settlement completed yesterday in the Tamir Rice case for $6 million. $3 million is to be paid out in 2016, and the balance of $3 million is to be paid out in 2017. The majority of the money is to go to the Tamir Rice estate. Tamir Rice's mother will get, I believe, approximately $250,000, and there's an additional sum within the $6 million that I believe is going to go to his dad. This clip on News One basically is going to discuss the settlement. In my opinion, though, the criminal case should have been one of the demands for the election of the new district attorney in Cleveland, and if possible, groups should get together to press him to reopen that case, because that case was an abortion as far as how it was handled. That case was basically a defense of the two police officers that killed that child, and not a proper prosecution. I'm hoping, but not holding out a lot of hope, for the Department of Justice coming in, taking a look at that prosecution, seeing how poorly it was handled, and prosecuting those two officers on civil rights violations.
We have settled the legal side of this and the court proceeding side of this for $6 million. There is no price that you can put on the life of the loss of a 12-year-old child.
And that was Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson after announcing the $6 million settlement for the November 2014 shooting death of 12-year-old Tamir Rice at the hands of Cleveland police. The Rice family sued the city of Cleveland, the officers, and the dispatchers for wrongful death after a grand jury declined to indict the officers. The mayor says an internal review is underway to determine if any disciplinary action will be taken against the officers, even though the settlement does not acknowledge any wrongdoing. Joining us now via Skype in New York to discuss this case is the attorney representing the Rice family, Zoe Salzman. Zoe, thank you so much for joining us today. Also on our panel, we have Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeaver, leadership strategist at the Exceptional Leadership Institute for Women, David Swerdlick, assistant editor at the Washington Post, and Sherilyn Harley-Laban, president and CEO of KLAR Strategies. Good to have everyone with me this morning. If I can just start with our guest, the attorney for the Rice family. Attorney Salzman, how is the family feeling about this $6 million settlement this morning?
Well, I think they recognize that the settlement resolves the federal civil rights lawsuit that they brought in some attempt to get justice for Tamir, to get accountability, and to really prevent this from ever happening to any other family in America. But at the same time, as they felt all along, there is really no amount of money that can make things right for them. They lost a son, they lost a brother, and they lost him when he was 12 years old. It's just something that no family should ever have to experience. So their grief is, exactly, and their grief is really, as it always has been, almost beyond words. This has been a nightmare for them from start to finish.
Explain to our viewers why we see this happening in several instances. It happened in the O.J. Simpson case, as well as others, where a criminal conviction is not on the table anymore. It's been taken off the table for whatever reason, by a grand jury, or just the trial didn't go as well. And then you move to a civil court in order to try and hold someone accountable for a death.
All right. A criminal conviction is not off the table. All that is necessary is that the new district attorney reopen the case and convene a new grand jury, and then bring charges against these officers. So she's not correct in saying that a criminal suit is off the table.
Well, that's right. I think Tamir's case is somewhat different in that there never was a fair trial in the criminal justice system because the former local prosecutor in Cleveland made it his mission to exonerate these officers. And he really mishandled the grand jury process there. He hired experts to tell the grand jury that the officers had done nothing wrong. He allowed the officers to testify before the grand jury without cross-examining them. And at the end, he told the grand jury that in his view, no crime had been committed. So
in other words, he didn't mishandle the prosecution. He got exactly the result that he was looking for. So there was no mishandling here.
It's in the view of the Rice family for a long time now that that was no justice at all. And they've actually asked the Federal Department of Justice to come in and do a real impartial investigation because they did not get that at the local level.
I want to bring the panel in on this. I don't know if you all, I'm sure you have by now seen the footage. And it's a bunch of Keystone Cop stuff that happened. I mean, when you look at it, it's just this quiet video of this child playing, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you know, a car comes up so quickly, and before you know it, literally before you know it, the child has been shot.
Absolutely. I have a 12-year-old son. And you can look at my child, as I'm sure you could have looked at Tamir, and instantly tell that this is a child. This is not a grown man. And he, in fact, was not even wielding the toy gun when they rolled up on him like that. In less than 2 seconds, they shot this man dead, specifically by a police officer that was fired at his previous job because of his incapabilities with handling firearms. What's happened in this case, the $6 million does not scratch the surface of true justice in this case. Those individuals need to go to jail.
Do we think that's going to happen?
Well, I don't think it's going to happen, and I think it would be hard at this point to get criminal accountability for those officers. I think, though, the point that Ms. Salzman made is true.
No, it wouldn't. All you got to do is open up a new grand jury and prosecute these guys, because that age-old saying is that a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich, and there's more than a ham sandwich here. There's actual evidence showing that these guys committed murder.
No, there's a sense in the community, there's a sense around the country that the city, that the mayor, the prosecutors, the police did not do a thorough investigation of the events that happened. The officers gave that statement where they said they warned 3 times, but a lot of people look at that video, Angela, and they say, was there really enough time to warn 3 times in that case?
And I think it also highlights the need for more police training, because apparently this gentleman was a trainee.
Right.
You know, what's the process? And I know that it differs in every different city and state, but perhaps there needs to be a more sort of national cohesive standard,
yes.
A uniform standard on police training, so that they can better deal with these types of situations.
And it just, again, back to the Keystone Cops concept, which I just can't do away with. You have a guy who's drinking beer at the bus stop who phones in and says, basically, there's a kid who's probably just got a little play gun and he's playing around, you know, blah, blah, blah. None of that was conveyed to the officers who were then dispatched to the scene.
There was a disparity there between why didn't that 911 call get to the police officers who were there on the scene.
Nevertheless, pulling your gun out and shooting a child within 2 seconds is just repugnant.
And let's just remember, this is an open carry state.
Right.
Which apparently open carry only applies to white people in this country, because we saw it with Tamir, we saw it with John Crawford. Even when you have toy guns, not even real guns, black people are shot dead sight on the scene. And so it is ridiculous. Beyond that, after they shot this child, you can clearly see that he's a child. You can clearly see that he's suffering. He's helpless.
4 minutes they were there, didn't do anything.
And, yeah, exactly. And in fact, beyond that, they tackled his sister when she came out to try to comfort her dying brother, tackled her onto the ground and placed her in the back of the police car where she could only watch her brother suffer all by himself.
Attorney Salzman, do you think that this is the end of it, or do you think that there's going to be further action taken against the authorities, as we've discussed here on the panel?
I think there's no question that Tamir's case, while a particularly egregious one for all the reasons that, you know, all the panelists have just mentioned, it stands out, but it's not, unfortunately, it's not alone. It's part of a pattern of police excessive force that's really plaguing our nation right now. And there does need to be a broader response. And one of the big reasons Tamir's family brought this case is to shine a spotlight on this sort of police excessive force and to really hopefully build a platform for broader change, which is just so unquestionably needed.
Yeah, and let's go back to Sherilyn's comment, which I agree with wholeheartedly, which is the need for additional training. And every time one of these incidents happens, which it's just all too often, I just keep saying, you weren't trained. You just didn't, you weren't trained. You shot somebody after 2 seconds, you got fumbly, your gun went off. What is going on? This is not Barney Fife, this is not Andy Griffith, this is real life. And it appears as if people just are not trained properly.
Yeah, I mean, Angela, I think it's also reflective of an attitude that I think we still haven't dealt with law enforcement. Look, it always bears repeating, and I say it every time we talk about this, that being a police officer is a dangerous job and a difficult job.
Yes.
But when you see so many incidents, as Ms. Saltzman pointed out, around the country where police maybe could have taken care or could have treated their suspect as a person rather than as someone
reacted completely
different.
I mean, like we saw in South Carolina, like we saw in Chicago with the young man who was shot 16 times. However, the first shot is what killed him.
Right.
And we ask, so why were there additional 15 shots fired?
Or the 137 shots fired at, a couple of people in a car in Cleveland.
But to me, it's beyond training, because in that case, for example, you had a cover-up. Let's just
Right.
And again, the journalists had to, like David, had to push for the judge to release that video a year later in the middle of a mayoral election, which of course apparently trumped the need for the parents to have this information.
There's systemic discrimination here. There is systemic bias against black males. We have seen all the data on unconscious bias and the belief to which, first of all, that black children are thought to be older than they actually are, that black people are thought to be dangerous, impervious to pain. All of this relates to this sort of overkill attitude by police officers. So I think it goes beyond training. It also goes to, who are you actually hiring? We need to do a better job of vetting the people who we give the responsibility of life and death issues, life and death decisions.
Well,
I agree.
And also I think what we saw in Ferguson, where they did the investigation and realized that there were not enough number of black officers on the police force. So again, it's the whole idea of community policing, at least my version of it, where you get people from that community who are serving their community.
Right.
And these people have a stake in it. These are people they've grown up with. When you bring people outside into the community to police the community, I mean, obviously,
well, I'm very, very lucky to say that one of my dear friends from Miami is now the police chief in Ferguson, and he is all about community policing. He is a wonderful man, and that's what you need, because what happens is, and I've talked to plenty of people about this, police officers are black, white, Hispanic, and blue reigns supreme.
Right.
So, we saw in the South Carolina incident, I believe, where an African-American man, a police officer, was on the scene and just didn't care either.
Right.
So back to the training, back to who are you hiring?
Right.
It starts at the top and cascades down. So if the chief of police is like turning a blind eye, I don't have a problem, well, then everybody else is going to be acting, crazy.
Who are you hiring, Angela, and who do you serve? Police are public servants.
That's right.
Well, that is the question.
There was a statement made this yesterday by the attorneys for the officers involved, which still denied criminal responsibility, and that's what you would expect them to say.
Right.
They're not claiming criminal responsibility. But there was a statement that's been reported this morning by a spokesman for the police union saying that some of the settlement money that's for the family should go to training people about the dangers of kids using toy guns, which is a travesty, because it reflects that police writ large are not understanding what people are feeling about this kind of case.
Yeah, and just like I've always said, those unions are a bunch of rat bastards, and they, in 99.9% of any police situation and wrongdoing, always will come down on the side of the police officer, unless, quote unquote, it's a police officer of color. Then all of a sudden they get a case of laryngitis and leave the officers out there to swing by themselves.
Hey, Salzman, let me give you the last word. What do you say about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a deplorable statement that the union put out. It's a pattern we've seen throughout Tamir's case, and again, representative of a lot of these cases, to blame the victim. You know, this was Tamir's fault because he was stupid enough, wrong enough to play with a toy gun. He was 12. He was a child.
That's right.
The officers are trained, they're adults, and as you know, as you say, they have a duty to serve and protect. It is a dangerous job, but it is a job they have chosen to undertake.
That's right.
And police officers across the country have spoken to us about how poorly handled Tamir's case was and how this should never have happened. Our investigation actually revealed that they shot this boy within less than 1 second. Officer Lohman, the shooter, actually jumped out of a still moving police car already shooting his gun. This was the equivalent of a drive-by shooting, and there is just no justification for it.
Not at all. Attorney Zoe Saltzman, thank you so much representing Tamir Rice's family. We really do appreciate you coming on the show. This has broken all of our hearts. Right now, it is 7:13.
All right, so like I said, in my opinion, that new DA, and they had an election where the former DA was kicked out. It may have just been a primary, and that the actual election will take place in the fall. But whenever this guy gets into that seat, we need to bum rush him about reopening that case, convening a new grand jury, and bringing charges against those rat bastard police officers that killed that child.